Hi, everybody. Welcome to Humane Voices, the official podcast of the Humane Society of the United States. Today, we are talking about the impact of disasters on people and our beloved pets and their beloved pets. Natural disasters can wreak havoc on communities, leaving families displaced and their pets incredibly vulnerable. And our guests today bring us insights on the challenges faced by people and pets during disasters. They have really been there for these situations repeatedly. We'll get some tips on how we can do disaster prep for our pets and ourselves. And our guest today, I'm so excited to welcome from the Weather Channel, producer Steve Petyerak and manager of media relations at the Humane Society of the United States, Kristen Peek. Welcome. And of course, Kelly, welcome, my co-host. Happy to see you.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm equally excited because we have not only, I think we're going to, and our listeners will learn a lot today, but when you have experts that have actually been on the front lines, in the storms, I'm excited to hear from both of you all. So let me start with this. Steve and Kirsten, I understand that you both have been to some of the same kind of disaster areas and have known each other for some time, but often you're like ships passing in the night, so share a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying, Steve and I initially connected when I think I was pitching tips for tornado safety to media after, I think it was just early spring one year when tornado season kicks up. There are a lot of unique considerations with tornadoes versus hurricanes and all of that for people to prepare with. And Steve reached out a little while later and said, "Hey, I'm a huge animal lover. I would love to find ways to help people prepare to keep their pets safe and incorporate that into some of our storytelling at the Weather Channel and give that a voice as much as possible." So that's when we first started communicating. I think that was back in 2019. And from there, we would text each other every hurricane we were deploying to. But yes, we're kind of ships in the night on that and didn't ever actually, we still have not rendezvoused in the field for an actual hurricane.
Have you met in person?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
We did a shoot about preparedness together in Nashville last year with the Weather Channel and the HSUS rescue team. So Steve, I think maybe I'll kick it over to you to talk about, y'all get into place way before our team does typically as far as actually getting onto the ground. And then we're in a bit of a holding pattern seeing what's going to happen from there.
Yeah, perfectly set up. I just wanted to say thank you for the invitation. Again, huge animal lover, huge animal advocate, and have been a fan of HSUS well before we all have gotten together on this podcast. So I'll break it down. So I used to work in sports prior to working in weather. So I'll break down, my team is pregame and in-game coverage. We basically go in, we figure out where the hurricane cone is tracking, where it's moving. I work pretty much exclusively with Jim Cantori, who is sort of the main, hurricane tracker, storm tracker for 40 years now at the Weather Channel. So we try and get into place, and we often sometimes get questioned about it. Why are you going right into the eye of a hurricane? But that is our job, and that is part of the pregame, is using operational meteorology, as Jim calls it, to its fullest extent to get in the middle of all the action, to show you, the viewer, the person evacuating, the person at church, the person at the grocery store, the person on the road, where not to be. If we are there, please do not be there, especially if there are evacuation orders. I equate it to someone like Jim Nantz announcing, or not Jim Nantz, anyone in particular announcing a basketball game, announcing a golf tournament, and you found out that person wasn't on site to actually announce the particular broadcast of that sporting event. It lends itself to not a lot of credibility. So we get ourselves into the safest possible position, and we just want to heed you to give you the best meteorological and weather advice to make your best decision for yourself and family. So that's the pregame. And then we get into the sort of the in-game part of it, which is actually getting through the storm. Very tough on ourselves and our crew. We get you through the storm live. We're one of the few teams outside of, just storm trackers and stuff like that online. We're one of the few national broadcast teams that will take you through it. And we have multiple teams out in the field deployed in various parts of the storm. And so that's the pre and sort of the in-game coverage. At that point, we're usually riding on 4 or 5 days to a week of already being in the thick of these really at times difficult conditions, and it sort of fatigues you mentally and physically. Hi LJ, my rescue dog barking there. And once we sort of get you through the storm, then comes the post-game coverage. And again, we have a slew of teams that are absolutely wonderful storytellers that will come in sort of our place. We'll do a day or two of aftermath, and then we'll sort of, our assignment will be to return home or to go on to another location somewhere else. And that's where HSUS picks up. And that is why she and I tend to be ships in the passing night, just because her mission and my mission a lot of times are the same, but they overlap each other or miss each other by a day or two. So as HSUS and other rescue agencies are coming in, we're trying to figure out what we're doing next, a lot of times just in terms of how the assignment's delineated at the Weather Channel. But I do really hope that we do get to align and we do get out to do live coverage or tape coverage with y'all, and helping you do the great work that you do. So.
Well, and I love that you shared that you had reached out to HSUS because personally, of course, you're an animal lover. You reference your dog with you today. But, how have you heard from listeners or others that there's increased interest on this? I mean, how do you help, as a representative in the media, give voice to not only pets, but I mean, what you're really doing is helping families, who are maybe missing their pets or who need help in just really critical time. So if you can speak to that a little bit too.
Yeah, Kelly, I mean, you bring up absolutely the Weather Channel's mission really is to keep people safe during storms, right? Like that is the reason why we are here. For every person that watches or hears about the Weather Channel, we want to keep you safe. We give you factual information, scientific data, and the best weather modeling that we have access to allow you to make the best decision for yourself and your family. So coupling onto that, you have the general people who watch the Weather Channel. We have our demographic, and another real passion piece of content, and Kirsten's a huge help to that too, is pet safety. I mean, we literally will do pet safety segments. There's 4 seasons in the year. We will always do them. Storms allowing, winter safety, fall safety, spring safety, summer safety. It's that important not only to us as a network, but to get that information out to you. Because as we all know, pets are our families and they're so unbelievably important, but they don't have a voice for themselves. So we do have to provide that voice for them. And Kirsten has done a wonderful job of tactfully just sliding along information to me whenever those seasons pop up, a story pops up. But our viewership definitely responds very strongly to pets. And we as a company, because it's so important to families and the US population, that is why we will forever, deliver pet safety content to our airwaves.
That's terrific. I mean, one of the things I'm really curious about, Steve, is how you've seen that change over time. Like I was trying to think about when I started in the field, I think that it was still tough sometimes for us to get coverage like this. And now I feel it's become pretty consistent. And I'm curious about whether were there particular disasters or points where you felt like, oh yeah, we really started tuning in to how important it is to cover the pet side of things?
Great question. And this could actually be a live interview on the Weather Channel. I mean, you're hitting all the notes just in terms of our content programming. I love to talk about it, especially because it's so near and dear to my heart. But I'll use a very tangible story in covering Hurricane Harvey. We were actually in the midst of just doing our live coverage when we noticed there were people that needed rescuing in an apartment complex behind us, literally an apartment complex. It's in the middle of the night when we started the coverage, could barely even see that far. And we started helping the people in need just as not to be part of the story, but because it's what needed to be done. We needed to stay on the air and inform people, but there were people that were in danger and we helped them. The Dallas Fire Department, this was in Houston for Harvey, but they saw our broadcasts, found where we are with our live location, and actually started aiding them in their rescue of these people in an apartment complex. There were rafts to get people out. They're bringing their belongings, their pets, get them to dry land and move on to the next group that needed to get out of that apartment building as, water levels were rising. And as water is inundating that structure, it's getting more and more unsafe, especially if you're on a second floor above. But during that live broadcast will forever be cemented in my head. There was a very young couple that was standing next to me and the rental vehicle that we used. We were on dry land, but the young man and his girlfriend or wife said to me, "We live in a neighborhood, way back behind there. Is there possibilities we can get a ride on a raft?" And I said, "Of course." I'm not coordinating the efforts, but they do look at us and say, "Do we need to take anybody?" And so after a pretty long period of time, there was a lot of people that they were helping and needed rescue. And the young man and his girlfriend or wife were a little dehydrated, didn't have much food. So I gave them some supplies out of my vehicle, some water, had them sit in the air conditioning. It's very muggy and, and not great out. It's pouring rain. And all of a sudden the boat that, the rafts that were coming by sort of gave the thumbs up or whatever the head nod was. And they waded out to that raft. And in their backstory, they had 1 dog, 2 dogs, 5 dogs. I can't remember. They said they were rather large dogs. And it was kind of really getting to them as they realized that they were okay. The next thing in line was, is their home and are their animals okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so as those people, sort of went away, I put myself in their shoes and said, wow, I can't imagine what it must be like to not know that your animals are alive or not alive.
Yeah.
And that was like a little bit of a breaking point for me. It hit a very emotional, whether, I think I was tired too. And it was just very emotional for me to watch those people, sort of go away in the distance on that boat, in my mind, knowing I will probably never see them again in their lives. And all I could do at that point was really just say a prayer and said, if they got to their dogs an hour before they were in real need of rescue and I helped with that, then that was a job well done that day.
Well, I love that story, Steve, because not only, you, as you said, you'd never see them again, probably, but that story years later is still being told. And that sounded like it was kind of a critical moment for you too, to really think about, pets and disaster. And so and also I'm sure when you signed up for the gig 11 years ago, this was under the all other duties assigned. Like you didn't know you'd, be saving lives from a broad platform. You knew that, but then individually like that in a disaster. I think that's really, really a great story, and also speaks to the additional work you get to do. And I'm curious, you mentioned a few different disasters that I think viewers and listeners have heard of. How do you, and this is really for both of you, how do you decide? Unfortunately, there are so many weather-related disasters happening. It's hard to keep up with them. How do you decide which ones you're going to cover, when there are so many? And so I guess I'll start with you, Kirsten, in terms of animal rescue. How do you determine which disasters we're going into? And I know resources, of course.
So my role is also, I fall into some of the other duties assigned. I did swiftwater training with the rescue team so that I can help physically with rescue work and kind of step in and out of a communications role and double as a responder as needed. But our rescue team decides where to deploy first and foremost based on where we get an official request for assistance from a government agency, a local police department. And that's one of the reasons we're coming in after the storm has made landfall. And sometimes several days later, even up to a week later, because it takes time for, during the initial recovery efforts and human search and rescue taking place for counties and, government agencies to assess, we have an animal need here and we need to get a, professional search and rescue team in place to help with the animal needs. And so that, the rescue team is doing work year round, even, outside of hurricane season, to establish relationships with locations that are likely to get impacted by disaster, whether that's hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, flooding events year round, so that we can kind of get familiar with those agencies and deploy pretty much at a moment's notice if we do get a request for assistance. So the rescue team is making decisions based on, our resources and capacity, the nature of the disaster, and what support we can provide in those situations. And then, of course, waiting for that official request for assistance to go into the field. And then sometimes they're able to provide support without needing necessarily to get a team, boots on the ground in place. Sometimes that's coordinating evacuation, like pre-storm evacuations of animal shelters that are likely to get hit, or removing animals that are already up for adoption, to increase the capacity of those communities to, kind of brace for the influx of displaced animals so that we can ensure that everyone has an opportunity to be reunified with their pets after a storm. Because that's, of course, everyone's goal here is to keep pets with their families. And we could do that with, good emergency planning, which I know we'll talk more about later. But yeah, those are, I think, some of the considerations for our team.
And Steve, what about with the Weather Channel and specifically Vince, you're covering how you determine that?
Absolutely. As these storms can change track. Sometimes, hourly, 12 hours, 24-hour cones are different than when you first, fan out into the field to try and cover these storms. And again, our mantra, and I've said it, I'll say it again, is to keep the public and ourselves safe. That will always be, what we strive to do. So storms are getting stronger, waters are getting warmer, and our mission is we see that well in advance. And Kelly and Carrie and Kirsten were, if I see something that is rolling into an area that you're at, I even do personal outreach. I'll say, my friends in Florida, this is what you need to do. Listen to your local managers, the EMA, heed their warnings. We're a national organization. They know better what your local area is like, but we're basically looking at something that could be potentially harmful to the general population, no matter where it is. And we want to get ahead of it, and we want to get you informed before it gets too late.
Steve, I'm really curious, and I suspect other folks are curious as well. And Kirsten, maybe you can answer this as well. But when y'all are covering a big disaster event, like what is, aside from like the long hours, the exhaustion, the emotional impact of doing that kind of work, like what are you actually, like where are you staying? Are you staying in like local hotels that still have power? Are you staying on a big sort of like news bus? Like how does the whole thing play out in terms of like what your daily lives are like when you're doing this work?
Kirsten, I've done most of the talking. You please go.
It varies where we're staying. Often because between the emergency management agencies like HSUS, or agencies like HSUS that are coming in to assist, and people who've evacuated from their homes, a lot of the time hotels are pretty booked up. My first hurricane disaster that I deployed to, I spent the first week of that sleeping on the floor of a surgical suite at an animal shelter that we were staging out of. And then, there have been times where we're in a municipal building that has, is closed. It's been evacuated. And so they'll lend us a conference room and we can all pull up some sleeping bags on the floor. And then eventually as people start being able to return to their homes or move further out of the area, oftentimes a hotel will open up. And so we'll kind of pile into those. But yeah, it varies. There have been times where we slept on our disaster rig, slept in the car in a parking lot, just wherever we can get that feels
Places not found on TripAdvisor.
No.
Some of those might actually be on TripAdvisor, Kelly. I think I've seen them listed, at least on Airbnb. I think those are highly listed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a adventure. There was a time that our option for showering was there was a dog sink thing for grooming, but it had a shower head. So everyone was just taking turns going into the dog lid room and hosing ourselves off. We'd been out in the water too, so showering felt important to the degree that we could. So
oh my God, Kirsten, when I was deployed during Katrina, I remember I went for like a week and a half without a shower. When I first got access to this big disaster RV where you could take a shower, I was like, was the most piddly, lukewarm, no water pressure shower. And it was the most beautiful moment of my life. Yes. I was like, I will never have a shower this good.
And Steve, tell us your dog grooming shower, worst of the worst story. Where's the Weather Channel putting you up?
Well, I will say, I wish I had running water where I stay. So I'm envious that you even do some. I mean, most of the time there is no running water. We really, and again, when I go back to sort of the pregame and the in-game stuff, there is a lot of last minute moving of our location. So what we would start out with and say, hey, there's a really strong, fortified hotel in whatever town in Florida. If that track shifts 100 miles to the south, my team does its live coverage. We pack up and, we are literally headed 100 miles south to get in the middle of this thing. So a lot of our, accommodations, they can be last minute. One of the toughest parts of doing a storm is once you get in the middle of it, and again, it's not, just standing in a storm. It's, live television, which is difficult in itself without a Cat 4 hurricane coming down the pike. But staying in touch with a control room, managers and executives back home in Atlanta to know that you're safe. I mean, there's just all of that goes by the wayside. And it's leading me to my point. When I see that power and the lights flicker, I know that's the last time I am seeing power. And that mostly, happens right at the beginning of our broadcast. And, like both of you have alluded to, then it becomes a really, really long road. There is no magic switch where we are staying, or we can turn the power on and make the water run, and we will do that until we are told that our assignment is over. And again, it's all because we are keeping ourselves safe. Sometimes it's not pleasant, but we get on TV and get on live TV, and we want to show you, if you do live in whatever town we are broadcasting from, this is what it looks like. There is natural gas leaks everywhere. You do not want to come into town. There's power lines down everywhere. We weave and bob sometimes in Hurricane Harvey, it took us, 2 hours to go 1 mile because we were avoiding power lines. So again, you are not to be where we are, and we are showing you those really extreme conditions. So
since you brought up safety, I want to talk a little bit about safety. Steve, I want to hear from you. What can people do to prepare? What are some things in anticipation of a storm? And then, Kirsten, I want you to talk about in preparation for a storm. How can families prepare with their pets for storms?
So June 1st is a really big date for those of you who follow Atlantic Basin hurricane season or not. That is the official start to it. So, and the most important thing to really do, especially if you're in a hurricane prone area, always prepare for the worst, because it only gets better if that doesn't happen. But prepare for prolonged power outages, have 7 days of water and food ahead of you. Kirsten will go through all the pet safety tips, but I always go through that too, because a lot of times there is not HSUS on the other side of the microphone when we're talking. And most importantly, have an evacuation plan, because as I said, my team and the Weather Channel are not going to tell you what to do. We can only give you the data that we're getting in terms of, hey, there's a local evacuation in these counties and in these cities. And then from then on, again, a very important safety tip: listen to your local managers. They know better than a national media organization, and they will be your best allies and assets to get you through the storm.
That's great. Thanks, Steve. Kirsten, what about our little furries? How do we best prepare them for a disaster?
Yeah, so it's important to, I think our tagline for disasters is, if it's not safe for you, it's not safe for your pets. So that I'll start with, kind of speaks to the importance of having a plan to safely evacuate with your pets, thinking about that far ahead of time before it becomes an emergency situation. Think about, how are you going to contain your pets if you need to evacuate? How are you going to transport your pets if you need to evacuate? Because a lot of the time, the people who suffer the most in natural disasters are people who, don't have the resources to be able to prepare adequately. And so it can become a real emergency situation where, you don't have a car, and maybe you were hoping you could ride out the storm because you didn't really have much of a choice. And now the water's rising, you don't have enough crates to contain your cats. How are you going to get them out of your house? And so, that's an important piece, is really thinking through, like, do I have a neighbor who knows to help me evacuate, whose car I can borrow, or a family member, nearby who can help with that? And if not, what are the local resources to, go ahead and have in mind to prepare? I think that piece is so key, is just how am I going to actually evacuate if we are in a situation where we need to? And then, a disaster preparedness kit should include things like, of course, the actual physical tools to evacuate and contain your pets. So crates, collars, leashes, food and water for your animals, veterinary records, and then also photos of you with your pets to aid in reunification if, the worst happens and you get separated. Having your pets microchipped and having your microchip information up to date all the time is key, but it's especially important when we start to think about, the whole reason we microchip is to prepare for the worst and the event that we get separated from our pets. So all of those things. And then doing research ahead of time into hotels that accept pets in the surrounding region. During disasters, there are provisions for, co-located shelters where humans can evacuate with their pets, but it's good to be prepared with, an exhaustive list of resources, because places fill up, or your go-to place that was available in the last hurricane might not be for this one, depending on the path of the storm. So a preparedness kit is key, but also sitting there and really thinking through, what is evacuation actually going to look like in the event we need to evacuate? And then something that comes up with hurricanes, but also tornadoes, which can go spin off of hurricanes sometimes, is practicing with your pets. A situation where you quickly need to crate, your cat, who might be kind of elusive once the crates come out, getting them comfortable and familiar with that flurry of activity so that you can easily, quickly contain them.
Doing the fire drill.
Yeah, doing essentially a fire drill, so it's not
Not making it feel like a fire drill.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because those situations, animals can feel our fear and panic and stuff. And so making it more of a routine thing can be helpful too.
That's great. Well, and it sounds like, I think a takeaway, obviously specific things. And for pet preparedness kits, we have at humanesociety.org a list of things. But for both of you, it's just really that preparation, that listening to the experts, thinking of the worst case scenario. That's really, really great advice. And I want to, as a total side note, but for the folks that listen to us in audio, I encourage you to also tune in to the YouTube channel to watch this podcast, because Steve brought in his rescue dogs. So, that was, I was trying to stay focused there for a minute, but, eyes diverting over there. So you'll have to watch this episode as well. So before we close, when we're talking about disasters and the work that you both do to save lives, pets, and people, it's really, really a heavy topic. And so, one, we appreciate that you're doing it. But we did we're going to lighten it a little, but also create an opportunity for our listeners to, go with us as we do a little bit of a test. So Steve and Carrie, because Kirsten gave us some information, I'm going to, if you're up for it, of course, do a couple little trivia questions with you. Steve, do you feel ready?
I am 100% ready.
Okay, Carrie?
I'm leaving. Sorry. I'm not.
Steve won.
All right. First point, Steve.
Okay. All right. So here are 4 things that should be included in a pet disaster prep kit. Pick the one that should not be included in the kit. Here we go, Steve. First choice, collar with ID. Second, pet food and water for at least 5 to 7 days. I think you said 7. Vaccination records or vodka. Which one should not be included in the pet preparedness kit?
Well, I know what would be in mine that would not be in the pet's preparedness kit, but that's a whole separate story. I do believe that the vodka would be good for the owner, but at that time, probably not. And yes, all those things are so important. I feel like at the Weather Channel, sometimes I'm doing Kirsten's job because I disseminate all of this information, and literally because I disseminate all this information, that felt like a layup question for me. I could have probably rattled off what the choices were along with the wrong
Steve,
answer.
we're not here for gotcha journalism. I'm here to give you a softball. Gary, this
was-
one's going to be, this one's a little tougher though. You know,
I
Yeah, it
was
was
just
like a-
going to
that was
suggest that
like
we
a-
could
like a beach
replace the
ball.
vaccination record with
that
actual
was an
medication.
inflatable ball.
No,
An
Gary, inflatable ball.
This one's for you. So which one of these isn't recommended for a pet disaster kit? Number 1, pet medications in a waterproof container. Number 2, a sturdy leash and harness. 3, your pet's favorite toy. Or 4, one of those Japanese toilets with the heated seat. Which one do you think it is, Carrie?
Wow, that's a tough one.
Take a minute.
I'm gonna have to go with the Japanese toilet with the heated seat, just because I find getting it into your car in a disaster situation seems like it would be very challenging.
But I will say, for the people end of things, some of the places they were saying that they've stayed, I mean, that might have been a nice, a nice little accommodation, amenity, if you
If
will.
that shower felt good, a Japanese heated toilet would have felt amazing in the middle of Katrina. I can
Exactly.
assure you
And
that, yeah.
I really, really enjoyed this podcast.
I don't
Thank
know
you
how I
all.
can top all this, but I guess I will just say really quickly, to return to something sort of serious. I mean, y'all, thank you so much for doing the work that you
Yeah.
do. I mean, it's incredibly important. I think one of the things that I was thinking about when we were talking was right after Katrina, I had this experience where we went to the Houston SPCA, and everybody who was coming out of New Orleans was going there because their animals were being picked up and taken to Houston SPCA, among many and many other groups. And there was this man that I met there who had come out of New Orleans. He'd been on an evacuation bus, and he hadn't slept in like 3 or 4 days, and he was pretty sure that his brother had drowned in Katrina. And he was there to get his dog, and they successfully reunited him with this dog, this little black Cocker Spaniel, who was just delighted to see him. And this guy had been through just like some of the worst things a person could go through, and was just devastated. And yet you could see him just brightening up again when he was reunited with this animal. So I just really want to thank you for everything that y'all both do to keep people safe and keep pets safe. It's so important, and it really changes people's lives. This is some of the worst stuff people can go through, and being able to sort of reunite with an animal, or know that your animal is safe, or prepare for your animal being safe along with the rest of your family, is just critical. So thanks for everything you do to make that happen.
Carrie, could I jump on one quick topic?
Please do.
HSUS, through Kirsten, was nice enough to extend an invitation to do hurricane preparedness training and how to rescue animals in the wake of disaster. And specifically, we did hurricane exercises, and they rolled out the boats specifically for us and rolled out their time. And it was a great labor of love. I enjoyed putting it all together and working with HSUS. But that's really how we all got here, is that we got to collaborate on that story and go out on the boats with y'all, and they were simulated exercises. But I think to the point of this whole podcast, it will help people in the wake of disaster, and will help people and pets stay safe. So
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And this has been an episode of Humane Voices, and we will see you next time on the pod.